Hello, everybody. Here at John's house, me and John. This is Flea speaking. And when John approached me about playing these records today, it made me happy. And we decided that instead of, because, you know, we wanted to play songs that really shaped us and songs that guided us and directed us in the way that we play our instruments. Not, you know, stuff that we loved, but there's some things that you love that when you hear them, it really sends you in a direction, and a new direction, like something you haven't thought of, and just something that just, you know, I'm sure it's different for both of us. But for me, always something that just, you know, my skin started tingling, my brain started whirring, and I got really excited, and I thought, I want to sound like that. And so that's what we did. And then, you know, for me, mostly as a kid, I listened to jazz, and it's just kind of a whole nother ballpark if I started playing jazz. So when I started playing bass is when I started liking rock music and funk, and then shortly after that, punk rock. And so John and I decided that we would just play music from sort of like from what, late 70s to early 80s, right?
Yeah, what I was like, basically, even though we were different ages, like I was about 11, 12, and he was about 17, 18, it was the same period of time, more or less. Like, it was basically, we both learned how to play in the early 80s. Like, the music that was current in the early 80s, say from like 77, 76 onward, that shit all seemed new at that time. And so, like, while we, especially me, I gradually got into older stuff. He already knew a lot of older stuff, but it was a very exciting time to be into new music. That, you know, like, I listened to the radio all the time before I had the money to buy many records, and they played really good stuff on the radio for a while there in the late 70s and early 80s, at least on KROQ they did, because it was a local station at that time, and the DJs played what they wanted, and they played cool stuff from England that the rest of the country didn't know about, and cool stuff from LA that the rest of the country didn't know about. So yeah, we're both going to play stuff that we liked, that was current, that we really liked in that, around that time period of early 80s, late 70s, I guess.
Yeah. And also, just to add to that, like, it felt new at that time, and it felt, I don't know if it's just because we were younger, or even though we're like 7 years apart in age or whatever, but it felt so new. Like, I don't hear things now. Very rarely do I hear something that seems so new. Like, I've never heard anything like this before. Right. And granted, it's because I hadn't heard as much. Yeah. But still, even in retrospect, looking back, it seemed like these punk records came out, these like different styles of music came out, and new ways of recording came out, that like people, like the DIY things, like kids recording who some often didn't even know how to record, like making these real raw sounding records, as well as like just sounded so different, like stylistically, aesthetically, every way. Yeah.
It really, when you found out about that music, I mean, you really felt like Flea already, and kind of people liked it. I guess at the skateboard park, that's where I would hear kids talking about music that were a bit older than me, and like learn about stuff that way. But at school, my fellow kids who were 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, they didn't know about it.
They were listening to the Germs.
They were listening to Journey and whatever else.
Yeah, the first song, you played a live version of Forming by the Germs.
That was from the Germs' first show.
Yeah.
At the Whiskey.
And the Germs are your favorite, like your first punk rock band you fell in love with? Or no?
That I can't say for sure, but they were my favorite band. If you would have asked me when I was 11 what my favorite band was, I was at 10, 11, that was the Germs.
Which is pretty fucking amazing, because, you know, I don't think I've ever met a little kid that was ready for something as, you know, not crafted like a pop song and as dissonant and abrasive as that at that age. I mean,
particularly that first show, like, really made me want to start playing guitar. I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm playing. Like,
was it that record, that recording?
That recording. Rodney Bingenheimer used to play it on his show all the time, and I would record it he would say, we've got some rare Germs coming up, and I'd get my recorder ready, and so I had a bunch of those songs, Suicide Machine, and a bunch of them. Those are amongst the first songs that I learned on guitar.
And that was so new. Like, for me, when I heard that stuff, it was already done. Like, I didn't get into the Germs. The Germs, Darby Crash was dead when I got into the Germs.
Yeah, he was still alive when I first was into him.
Yeah. I mean, I was late on everything. But
So,
speaking of things I was late on, I'm going to play one of my favorite punk songs of all time, and it really struck me when it came out because it's just funky as shit, and the groove is intense, and it's by the Slits, and it's called Shoplifting.
that was Anthem by China White, and now Flea is going. Here, you want to talk?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, this song I'm going to play is by the band Defunct, Joe Bowie's band, who's the brother of Lester Bowie, and Lester Bowie's famous for the Art Ensemble of Chicago. But this song in particular has so much to do with the birth of the Chili Peppers, and the first song we ever wrote out in L.A. Was me trying to do an imitation of this bass player on Defunct, and here it goes right now.
So that was 45 Grave. That was 45 Grave Black Cross. Very fast song for the time, and it was also one of the first tunes. That band was one of the first in LA, or if not the first, to have this kind of occult, gothic kind of imagery associate and vibe to what they were doing. So that's a wonderful single. Flea has a little story, I believe, about.
Well, I was wondering if it was appropriate, but Anthony and I went to this great club called Al's Bar in LA and saw 45 Grave play and had no idea what we were getting into. And they played that song. I bought that 45 at the gig. They were selling them at the gig, and bought it at the gig, and they were just so over the top thrilling. And the drummer, Don Bowles, who's also the drummer in the Germs, was just an amazing drummer. And after the show, we walked up to him, and Anthony was like, we were just like kind of like quivering with excitement. And Anthony said, that was such an incredible show. You're such a great drummer. I can't even believe it. And, or something to that effect. And Don Bowles said, oh, yeah, cool. Yeah. Got any heroin?
That's the punchline, everybody. Yeah. I know you people are shocked by that kind of thing nowadays. So.
Yeah. It was great. It was wild. And then, before that, I played Twisted Roots, who were friends of ours, and the song was called Potential What? And I think they only ever put out that 145. They made an album later with a different singer, but the singer on that 45 is Maggie Ehrig, and she's a very dear friend of mine. And they were just like, the first time I ever saw them play was at the Starwood, and the drummer, this guy Emil, was like 14 years old or 13 years old. I can't remember. He was a kid, and he just looked so cool and rocked so hard. And the bass player, Kira Rossler, who's the sister of the keyboard player Paul Rossler, who played in the Screamers, another great LA punk band, really like forward-leaning progressive punk band. Kira was one of my favorite bass players in the world, and that bass line on that song I played, Potential What, is just fucking out of its mind. One of the craziest rock bass lines I've ever heard in my life. So shout out to Kira. And now gonna play a song that we used to just listen to over and over again all the time, and it's one of those things that influenced my bass playing hugely. Dave Allen from the Gang of Four. And also...
and also before that, I played Janitor by Suburban Lawns, who were another great LA band, arty, kind of new wave band.
Great fucking band. And also, Andy Gill died recently, and he produced the first Chili Pepper record, and he was the guitar player in the Gang of Four. And this is a song called Cheeseburger by the Gang of Four.
That was Devo... Smart Patrol / Mr. DNA, a song with a particularly great guitar solo that I've studied many a time. And before that, Flea played...
Yeah. I played Can I Touch It? Why Can't I Touch It? By the Buzzcocks. And, I was so drawn to songs that had these hypnotic bass lines that you can really hold on to. And that one has such a great bass line. It's just like this skeleton of the whole song all the way through, that everything moves around. And it made me so happy to hear it. Pete Weiss played it for me for the first time, and it just blew my mind. John, did you ever actually own a flower pot Devo hat?
No. That the nice thing when I got into them, that album wasn't out yet, where they did the flower pots. So it was what the big thing at that time. It was cool because you back then T-shirt shops were all over the place. So you could just go into any T-shirt shop and get a black T-shirt and tell them to put the D leaning to the left, the E leading to the right. You just tell them how to do it. They just had to put 4 letters on a black shirt, and you had an official Devo shirt basically. But you could buy it for super cheap, like $1, or you know what I mean, like $1.99.
Those little velvet letters.
Yeah, because that was they sort of made their sort of official shirt something that anybody could make anywhere, and so it was kind of a fun thing. So I made one of those. And there were things you could order, like yellow plastic suits at that point, but I didn't have the money to do that.
I remember seeing all these pictures of Dick Rude when he was a kid, and he just wouldn't take the fucking flower pot off.
Yeah, I was going to dedicate that song to our old friend Dick Rude, who not only was Devo his favorite band at one point, but he saw them at the Marina Del Rey skate park, a show that I wanted to go to. I knew about it, but I wasn't allowed to go to that because I was 9 years old. You know?
Yeah. You know those places where you get the shirts made. There used to be this one on Melrose. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like right when Melrose started becoming this trendy street. That's a street in Hollywood for everyone that I grew up around. But we went there to get the first ever piece of Chili Pepper merch made, and it was a hat that said Red Hot Chili Peppers on it. But Anthony did it, and he spelled them wrong. We put an E instead of an I. Didn't know how to spell it yet. And it was like the Country Chile, the Red Hot Chile Peppers.
Right.
Yeah.
And then before that, I played Kids of the Black Hole by the Adolescents. You said the Buzzcocks, right?
Yeah, I said.
Yeah, and I played Kids of the Black Hole by the Adolescents. That was definitely one of my favorite songs at the time that came out. And the lyrics are really beautiful for anybody who wants to look them up and read them and listen back to this when there's the archives, or listen to it on YouTube or whatever. But it's a song, I believe, written about a squat that punks used to live in back at that time, 1980, 81 or so. And yeah, they're really great lyrics.
How old? Wait, what's the singer's name in Adolescence again? Tony. Wasn't he like a little kid, right? Wasn't he? These guys, punk bands,
they're all very young here.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me that these classic fucking punk records. I don't know how it was in England that much, but in LA, it's like they're kids, man.
Yeah, they're like 16, 17, 18 years old.
And the songwriting's so good.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking earnest.
And it's so deep.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to play a funk record that I really got into, I think 81, I think it was. Me and Anthony had just got our first house ever away from home, where we were living together. He had already moved out in high school, but my first home away from home on Formosa Avenue in Hollywood. And I used to play this all the time, and it just was a song that made me just feel fucking great. And it has a great bass line. It's funky as shit. That song was called Squeezed, and it's by the band What Is This? And it's a real Hillel Slovak composition. And, you know, as anyone knows, Hillel was the original guitar player of the Chili Peppers. And, you know, he passed away, much too young. And he's the guy that asked me to start playing the bass guitar. And I really feel like, you know, that's the best recording that band ever did by, you know, according to me. And I'm not on it because I had left the band and they were better without me, I guess. So anyways, that's when I hear that song, it just transports me back to another time. And I'm so glad that it exists because Hillel's playing on it. It's so beautiful.
And I'll as a lead up to this song I'm going to play next, I'll say that when I was a little kid, I wanted to go to lots of shows that I wasn't yet allowed to go to. The first the first show that I ever went to was just my friend Millard, who worked at the local health food store, about a 30-year-old guy that I was friends with when I was like 10 years old. He took me to the Whiskey A Go-Go to see the Sensible Shoes and Martha and the Muffins. They weren't bands that I knew at that point, but I was just happy to be at a new wave punk event. But the first shows that I went to that I actually really wanted to go to and got tickets and stuff. I'm pretty sure the first one was the B-52s, who I just played a few minutes ago. That was 52 Girls, the original single version by the B-52s. I saw them at the Sunrise Theater in Fort Lauderdale. That was very exciting. I danced on my chair for the whole show, as did everybody who was there, and I just couldn't believe how happy it made me. But the first show that I went to here in LA, where I lived most of the time, was Adrian Belew at the Beverly Theater, which was on Wilshire. And this is the first song that he played. And he was, other than like Jimi Hendrix, he was my favorite guitarist at that time. So again, I was happy beyond belief. So that was Peter Gabriel, who I first found out about from hearing that song on the radio when I was a kid, who's, went on to definitely, between his work in Genesis and his solo albums, just has turned out to be one of my favorite artists ever. So that song is called Games Without Frontiers. It's on his first album. And then before that, Flea played Tattooed Love Boys by the Pretenders. That's a record that we both loved. I remember that being, yeah.
We've been talking about stuff in 7 lately.
Right, yeah. We've been noticing good rock and funk songs in 7 lately.
Yeah. And I never even realized that was in 7.
Oh, you weren't up.
Yeah. I wasn't up. But yeah, no, that song was in 7.
Yeah.
And I just, on that song, the first time I ever heard of the Pretenders, I heard, John mentioned the local LA station KROQ earlier, and I put on K-Rock and I heard that Pretenders song, and I had just, I didn't even know about punk rock yet. I didn't know anything. I had just recently gotten into rock music, and I liked prog rock, and I liked Hendrix and Zeppelin and stuff. And I heard that song, and even though it was still a couple of years before I really got into punk rock or understood it, was smart enough to immerse myself in it, that was, the high energy and the songwriting craftsmanship and the playing, and Pete Farndon is such a great bass player, and I think really unsung in the pantheon of bass players. And so, I just love that song, and it just, it really put a lot of joy in my heart.
And it's also got a great guitar solo by James Honeyman Scott.
Yeah.
And before that, I played Adam and the Ants, the song Kings of the Wild Frontier. They were an incredibly powerful group. I recommend to anybody out there to watch the YouTube performance of them doing Kings of the Wild Frontier live in Manchester in 1980. I don't think they ever had the vibe after that, the energy that they had at that time. They were really a force to be reckoned with at that time. Not only an incredibly powerful live band, but also that album just has an incredible amount of great songs. It was one of the first times when I was a kid that I noticed, like, somebody having like 6 songs that were being played all the time on K-Rock at that time. Like, it just had, it was like you almost had the whole album just from hearing it all the time on the radio. It had so many, it's packed with good songs, and just, he was a great singer, and they were a really powerful band. And then before that, Flea played Material.
Yeah. And amazing about Adam and the Ants too, that like I hear it now and it's so arty and strange, and the sound of those drums and stuff, and it was super fucking popular.
Yeah, in LA it was. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the country yet. Later he became a really big star on MTV, but this is before MTV. So his first album was pretty obscure. But then that album caught on, I'm sure, in like New York and LA and certain places.
Yeah.
I don't think it was big in the whole country.
Yeah, I
it
guess
was
I'm
weird
thinking,
music.
I'm thinking K-Rock in LA just played it
Yeah.
constantly, and I just thought of it as like the biggest band on earth.
Yeah, they really. Yeah.
And I hear it, and it's like wild African drumming, and
Yeah.
like trippy instrumental parts. And
Yeah,
shit.
I've seen like Graham Massey from 808 State citing like Adam and the Ants as an influence. Like I think people who started doing that electronic music where it was more based on drums, where drums are a featured instrument, they're not just the timekeeper in the background, like where there's sections with no melodic instruments and stuff. Adam and the Ants had that all over the place, and it was not normal,
Yeah, it's amazing. And like John said, I played material before that with another great bass player, Bill Laswell, and his bass playing on that song I played, Memory Serves, is stunning and just blew my mind. I had seen him play with Fred Frith's Massacre at the Whiskey, and he was playing bass with a stick, and it was this real like wild improvisational music, and I'd never heard or seen anything like it. And I remember after seeing that show, just like going to rehearse with what is this, and just thinking could do anything, like I was going to play with my stick, I'll play with my shoe, I'll do anything. It just seemed like the weirder you could play, the more, it really sent me off, and just trying to be arty and weird. And Bill Laswell was great, and that's a great band and a great song. And also the guy who produced 2 Red Hot Chili Peppers albums, Uplift, Mofo, Party Plan, and Mother's Milk, sang the lead vocal on that, Michael Beinhorn. So, little Chili Pepper history for you, folks. And now I'm going to play a song off George Clinton's Computer Games album. And this is a song that over and over again I would just, it was one of those like drive around a car in the summer, just happy as all get out, listening to this song. And this whole album is really one of my favorite. I think of it all as P-Funk, all of George's records, but it's a George Clinton solo album, and a great, great epic album. And this song's called One Fun at a Time.
So that was The Great Curve by Talking Heads, which contains I can objectively say, some of the greatest lead guitar playing ever by Adrian Belew. And before that, we played League of Gentlemen. This is all stuff that we both liked at the time,
Yeah. The song, the League of Gentlemen song, was Cognitive Dissonance, and something that struck me when I put it on was that. So, like John said, like it's all stuff that we both love and really loved at the time, with maybe a few things, 1 or 2 things that we would have loved had we known about it, but maybe we didn't. What the other guy liked, but I every one of these songs is something that really just sent me off in a new direction and a new level of excitement, and I just realized when I put on League of Gentlemen that the bass player on the League of Gentlemen was a woman named Sarah Lee. And I was just so excited. Like, at the time, I was like, whoa, a girl bass player. And she was so great. And then John played The Great Curve, which has Tina Weymouth on bass of the Talking Heads, who's a great bass player. And before that, we listened to... and also Sarah Lee went on to play in the Gang of Four, who we played earlier, who are from Leeds. And then... before that, I played Defunct, and when I saw them play at the Whiskey, play that song, and I was out of my mind with joy. They had a female bass player, a girl called Kim. I don't remember her last name. And what was the other one? There was another girl bass player that we played that I was saying.
Kira?
Oh, yeah. Before that, early on, I played Twisted Roots, and it was Kira Rossler on bass. So that was 4 women bass players, which, I don't know, that was just cool, cool as hell. And all bass players that really...
were big influences on you.
Big influences, like really huge. So that's interesting to me.
And so that takes us back to the last thing. And then and then before that I played the song Mile High Club by Bow Wow Wow off the version on the EP called The Last of the Mohicans, them and Adam and the Ants both had like a sort of an Indian motif.
Yeah.
And something the Chili Peppers also kind of had when I was first getting into you guys. It was sort of like a connection to these other things that I liked.
And both were associated with Malcolm.
Well, yeah, there's a whole story behind that. People can look up on the internet. It's not a very pleasant story. But.
But I have just a funny story about it. I just feel like I should say it real quick, even though we're getting towards the end and we want to play music, but I'll just say it really, really fast. That at one point in the Chili Peppers, I think we had made our first album, or maybe not, and we met with Malcolm, what's his name, McLaren? McLaren, yeah, who was, kind of, a hustler. And he wanted to work with the Chili Peppers and real excited. He had done Bow Wow Wow and worked with Adam and the Ants and worked with the Sex Pistols, and we just thought, wow, if he works on your record, you're gonna have the greatest record in the world. And I got all excited, and he came to visit us, and he showed up in a Rolls Royce, and he was like wearing these flowing white robes, and he walked in, and we were just these grungy kids, and I had smoked like a pound of weed before, and we sat down and started talking to him, and he was like, right, here's what we're going to do. You guys are going to stop playing the music that you're playing. No more of this like fancy funk business. You're going to play Chuck Berry style rock and roll. It's going to be surf punks because you guys are surf punks, and Anthony's going to be the star, and it's going to be surf punks, and the rest of you guys are going to take a back seat and play Chuck Berry rock and roll. And I had been so excited to meet him, and I was sitting there, and when he started telling this to me, I was real stoned, and I just fainted. I fainted at the table. My head just went, bump, and hit the table, and I passed out cold out of shock, and it was so weird. And anyways, that's enough of that. We're getting down towards the end, and we're going to play a song off a great album called Scary Monsters by David Bowie.
Another song with some of the best lead guitar playing ever.
And some of the greatest fucking songwriting I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, so David Bowie went on to definitely be a huge influence on us and me in every way, but in many ways. But that was the first time I ever heard him and needed to identify who is that character that I'm hearing on the radio, and that was like Peter Gabriel. That song "Scary Monsters" was what made me need to find out who that was when I was like 10 years old.
Yeah. I think for me, I had heard Bowie before and loved him. But I think it was the first time I truly fell in love with Bowie, actually, if I really think about it. Like, even more than Ziggy or Low, which I loved, Heroes I loved. But that when I heard Fashion, there's a funk song. And what's the other one? Fashion, I don't know. I just think it was one of those songs I just listened to over and over and over and over. Maybe it's not a funk song, but it was funky to me.
I think it is.
Yeah. And anyway, so we have to go. We're going to stop. But it was fun as hell to play the music.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening, everybody.
I'm going to quit the Chili Peppers and become a DJ. Travel around.
On Dublab. For closer, we're going to play a tune by the Minutemen called Joy. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.